Monday. All right, so Friday, I got a little off track. Talked about the national debt and some other stuff. If you hadn't noticed, I do have your test grade. They're in Power School. Yes, sir.
I have a question about that. When you were saying them out loud the other day, you said -8, but then it said -12 in the Power School.
Yeah. So that was the first part of the test. You know, you had to do some writing. So I still had to grade that. And that's what I spent about 6 hours yesterday doing. So as soon as all of my students have taken the test, I will hand those back and let you see them and talk about them and give you some good feedback. Actually, I gave you some feedback on the test, and I'll just give you a little more. Okay. Some of you I will praise, and some of you I'll say, well, you need a little kick in the butt. Okay. But this class, overall, was pretty good. We had a few A's, which I was really happy about. Believe it or not, I like it when students get A's. So good job to those. And those that didn't get what they wanted, we got to figure out a different way to study. Okay. So today we're actually going to get into the New Deal and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Okay. Now, this thing called a New Deal is really anything but Hoover. So, like, people were looking for, listen, the system wasn't working because we were in a depression. We had millions of people unemployed. The system was broke. So when Roosevelt came along and said, I want to have a new deal for Americans, nobody really knew what that meant. It kind of reminds me of when Obama was running for president. His campaign slogan, I don't expect you to remember this, you were like 4, was hope and change. Hope and change. In fact, they said that so much I got really tired of hearing it. What is the change? Well, we don't really know, but it's just going to be different than George Bush. Okay? And similarly here, this idea of a New Deal, guys, really evolved over time. But it was directly influenced by these people. And some more that I'm going to put up here. Okay? We looked at Harding's cabinet, looked at the actual people in his cabinet, and his cabinet had a nickname called the what? The Ohio Gang. Okay? And that's a phrase or a term that would come from the press, the media. This one, the brain trust. Okay? So, historians look back at this with kind of a romantic view of this administration and the people in it. Okay? So let's dig into this a little bit and we'll get a broad overview of what we're talking about. Okay? So his very group of advisors, he was looking for new ideas because the old ideas weren't working so well. So he's going to pick people from different backgrounds. Harold Ickes, that's how you say that, Ickes, is the Secretary of Interior. Ickes, Interior. Okay, Mikey? You remember that on the test, you got the matching right. And a lot of you guys struggled on the matching. Okay, so you're looking at the bio. He's a progressive reformer. He's a former Republican. Now remember, Roosevelt's a Democrat. Just went through Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover were all Republicans. So the country swings, the pendulum swings in the other direction. Okay? Henry A. Wallace. Henry A. Secretary of A. Agriculture. You just got that right on the test. Okay? Now, he's another former Republican. Guys, the mayor of Dallas this last week, an elected Democrat. Okay? Switched parties to the Republicans last week. You're allowed to do that, by the way. he can switch parties. Okay. So right now in Texas, Democrats aren't real popular, and he's like, these people, I'm not with them anymore. I'm with the Republicans. Okay. His father had been the Secretary of Agriculture before him, Wallace. Okay. Now, this guy's important because he is going to become Roosevelt's second vice president. Wallace will. Who was his first vice president? Texas. John Garner. Garner's only going to be a one-term vice president. Wallace is going to be Roosevelt's vice president for his second term and his third term, but not his fourth term. So Roosevelt's going to be elected in 1944, a final time. There was no term limits by that point, at that point. Okay, that's the 22nd Amendment. Okay, term limits. Two terms. 22, 2 terms. Okay, now, when Roosevelt was running for his fourth term, the Democratic Party said, you have to find a different person as vice president. Because Roosevelt was old, he was frail, and he could die at any day. Kind of like the current president. Like Joe Biden could die any day. He's 80 years old. He has a stressful job. Okay? Donald Trump's 78. Biden's 80. Either one of them could drop dead at any point. Life expectancy for an American male is 78. Okay? So if he dies, if Biden dies, who becomes president? Kamala Harris. Okay? The Democrat Party told Roosevelt, you got to drop Wallace because he's a communist. And I'm not making that up. He's a closet communist. And so the Democrats said, look, President Roosevelt, there's a chance you won't survive the 4 years of your last term here. Okay? You need to find somebody else. And of course, he chose Harry Truman, okay, of Missouri. Okay. So that's some interesting stuff, okay? Henry Morgenthau is going to be the Secretary of Treasury, replacing Mellon, who was there forever, okay? He's a close friend, wealthy friend and neighbor. Roosevelt is wealthy. FDR is rich, okay? So is his friend. Okay, he'll be Secretary of Treasury. Now, other than the name not starting with an H, Cash, what are you talking about?
Treasury.
Nice. Okay. The Secretary of Treasury today starts with a Y.
Well, I just meant so far.
But it's interesting because it's, like Mellon, it's Yellen today. Janet Yellen instead of Mellon. Now I'm confusing you. Okay. But that was interesting, yes? Okay. What might be different about this name other than not starting with an H? Francis. Isn't it usually spelled with an I? Francis. So when it's a female Francis, it starts with an E. So it's a woman. In fact, it's the first woman cabinet member in the history of the United States. And her name is Frances Perkins. She's the Secretary of Labor. Now, there's a mnemonic device there if you look hard enough. She is the Secretary of Labor. She. You got it?
I got it.
Got it? Marsh? You got it? All only women can go into. Yeah, exactly.
Later.
Thank you. Okay. So that's one way to remember this one, right? Now we have 4 members of the cabinet. Now, was she qualified, or was this just a diversity hire? Actually, she's qualified. You probably don't remember this from history last year, but in Chicago, the Whole House was a place that was made by women, for battered women, like women who had bad husbands. And this was a place that helped women out. She was in charge there, and then became the New York State Industrial Commissioner. So she was qualified, okay? Not just now, Roosevelt probably had some encouragement to do this from the First Lady. And who is the First Lady? The longest serving First Lady in American history. Eleanor Roosevelt. Okay. So, do wives have influence over their husbands? Yeah, they do. I can admit to that. Okay. Now, so Eleanor Roosevelt, or do you know her maiden name? Eleanor Roosevelt. Her last name is Roosevelt. She married Franklin Roosevelt. Are they related? Yes. Now, they're not first cousins or second cousins. I think they're like 5th or 6th cousins. And Franklin is also cousins with Teddy Roosevelt. Okay. What's that? Yeah. Okay. This is New York, not Arkansas, or as you guys would say, Alabama. Right? Okay. So, Eleanor is going to really play a big role here. Okay. Franklin does take advice from the First Lady. Now, some of the other advisors that Roosevelt had that make up this brain trust. Now, there's a picture of Francis over there on the right. And then this is Harry Hopkins. Okay. He is a social worker. Now, this guy is going to be with Roosevelt for all 13 plus years. Okay. Cabinet members come and go. You know what I mean? They come and go. Like Wallace will be Secretary of Agriculture for 1 term, then he goes and becomes Vice President. These other people will come and go. Okay. Hopkins is a mainstay. I remember reading a biography on Winston Churchill. And Churchill, who was the British Prime Minister during World War II, said every time he wanted to talk to Roosevelt, he had to go through Hopkins. Okay? This is his closest advisor. Like, for instance, whatever you feel about President Biden, right? So, like, President Biden, he's old, right? And sometimes it doesn't seem like maybe he's all there. Like old people sometimes they don't tend to have all their faculties, okay? So who is in his ear? Who is driving American policy under Biden? Is Joe Biden the one that's like coming up with the ideas and doing it all? Or is he just kind of the figurehead of it? I think you can probably figure that out. So who's the driving force behind it? I don't expect you to know that, but you might look at names like Susan Rice. Okay, his chief of staff Klein has been with him for years. Maybe a guy you've heard of. I don't know. Barack Obama, who Biden was vice president for. So this is certainly the case here. Hopkins is going to have a lot of influence, okay, with Roosevelt. He's going to try and find many professors, graduates with the best minds, like people with different different backgrounds, different ideas, okay? So this informal group, along with the cabinet, becomes known as the Brain Trust. Scores of New Deal programs that would carry the imprint of this group of people, okay? Now, before I go any further, what do we know about Roosevelt, like about his personal life and that sort of thing? Like, what do you know about FDR? What's that? No, he's not. He's not Catholic.
Is he the one in the wheelchair?
In the wheelchair. Yes. Major. First Catholic president. Okay. Yeah, the acronym. You get LBJ and yeah. Okay. Okay. Why is Roosevelt in a wheelchair? Polio. Now, polio, guys, is still around. It's kind of a scary disease because we still don't understand it. And we do have a vaccine. So chances are you're not going to get polio if you have the vaccine because it's an actual vaccine, not a therapeutic. Okay. So we talked about this the other day. I was reading this interesting article. You guys know, speaking of Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr., he's running for president. Okay, this is Bobby Kennedy's son, John F. Kennedy's nephew. Okay, he's running for president as a Democrat. He's challenging Biden. And he talks a lot about the vaccine stuff. Okay, we talked about the chicken pox one. And in Europe, I mean, like, I think you have to have the chicken pox vaccine to come to school. Is it one of the required ones? Okay. In Europe, they don't require it. And here's why. Because studies have shown that that vaccine helps lead to shingles later in life. Have any of you guys had shingles? Know anybody that has? I heard it's extremely painful.
What is it?
I don't know. I've never had it, but I think it's a skin thing.
It shows up something.
I think it's more like a painful rash.
Like just like patches of like super dry skin.
Okay. Yeah, I heard it's really painful. But in Europe, they don't mandate the chickenpox vaccine. And of course, RFK was talking about this because he likes to talk about vaccines a lot. Okay, RFK Jr. Okay, so that's interesting. I was like, wow, what am I talking about? Polio vaccine. Okay, so guys, if you get polio, it can paralyze you. Okay, for Roosevelt, it was from the waist down. Okay, I don't know if you guys ever heard of the iron lung. You heard about this? Okay, this is like, so if you're paralyzed from the neck down from polio, they can put you in this tube and you're on your back, and it helps, like, the pressure from the tube like raises your lungs, opens and contracts and so forth. And I saw this documentary, I don't know, a couple of years ago about this guy that basically lived in an iron lung for like 40 years and became a lawyer and actually practiced law, like in a courtroom, in his iron lung. Okay, which, I mean, that takes some kind of like perseverance in a human being to do something like that. Okay, because you can't even use your hands. You're just your head sticking out of this freaking tube. Okay, guys, my in-laws, my father-in-law was born in Houston, and when they were kids, you guys know the Galveston area, they would send the kids to the beach every summer to get them out of the city so that they didn't get polio. Okay, it's a scary thing. But so Roosevelt got polio in his 20s, okay, and was paralyzed. Now, I want to ask you a question. You guys have an assignment due Wednesday, okay? So if you did not get your test grade where you wanted it, you certainly want to do that assignment. Okay, it's due Wednesday at midnight. I know quite a few of you did the first assignment. Does anybody remember the question about Woodrow Wilson and eugenics? But does that ring a bell? Okay, you know what eugenics is? It's a pseudoscience that says, you know, you can create a stronger race of people if you clean up the gene pool. Okay, what do I mean by that? Clean up the gene pool. What's that?
Killing people with disease.
Okay, you could kill people, or you could not let them reproduce. Okay, you guys been to Walmart? Kidding. Okay, so we're talking here about like criminals. Okay, people that like are repeat offenders, like always in trouble with the law, or murderers. People that are mentally off or physically off, like they're born with birth defects. Okay, prostitutes, drug addicts, alcoholics could be sent to the state hospital. And we had a state hospital in Winfield, Kansas, about 40 miles to the south of us, where we practiced eugenics in Kansas. So if you were a repeat criminal offender, a danger to society, the thought was, we don't want you to have children because those genetic predispositions will be passed on to your children and you will be a criminal. You're a drug addict, your kids are going to be drug addicts. If you're mentally off, your children are going to be mentally off. If you are physically off, your children are going to be, and those people that are born will be a burden on society. So at the Winfield State Hospital, guys, they would do forced castrations, sterilization of women as well, for hysterectomy. Shut up. 12? Sorry.
Seniors.
Yes. Now, did you hear what I said? What do you call it when they sterilize a male? Castration. Okay? Now, the Kansas State Fair used to be in Topeka. It's in Hutch now. They would have what were called fittest family contests and choose the family that is the most fit. So this would include factors like how smart you are, how physically fit you look, and of course, how beautiful you are. Okay? To pick the optimal family, the perfect family. Okay? They had contests for this. Woodrow Wilson supported these policies of eugenics. Who is the founder of Planned Parenthood? Margaret Sanger. Now, why did she form Planned Parenthood? This is for abortions, yes? But more specifically, strategically, they would place those abortion clinics where? In the black neighborhoods. So black mothers would have the option to kill their offspring. So there would be fewer black babies in America. That's why Planned Parenthood was started. To form eugenics. Okay? Adolf Hitler praised American eugenics. He said, what you guys are doing with eugenics is smart. Now, I want you to know that it flies in the face of everything that is Christian. You understand? We are all created in God's image. We are all brothers and sisters in Christ. We all have human dignity. Whether you are the fittest family or not. Okay? Just made a joke about, have you been to Walmart? Now, 0 hour, everybody laughed, so I don't know what's going on with you guys. But haven't you seen those big, memes and stuff of people at Walmart? Okay, never mind. No. I think what I'm going to do is move on. Okay? Because I'm not getting anything from you guys. So, certain people you might look at and say, maybe they shouldn't have children. Okay? It's a joke. It's a joke. Okay? It's a joke. For the whole world to see, unless YouTube says they want to censor me, which they may. Okay? Like they did Russell Brand. You guys know who Russell Brand is? And I'm purposely bringing this up because I'm going to submit this on YouTube. Okay. How many of you guys know who Russell Brand is?
He's in Bedtime Stories, right?
Is he?
You know that movie with Adam Sandler?
He probably. Yeah. He's an actor. He's a comedian. Okay. He's British. Yeah. Yeah. So he's lived a very, let's just say he was like kind of a male slut, if you will, okay, when he was young, okay? And then at some point, Russell Brand, during COVID, really, became conservative in many ways. And so he's been calling out the British government and the American government and so forth. And apparently 4 women have come forward and said that he raped them. Okay, back in 1988, I think it was, or 2006 or something. Anyhow, they went to a news organization. They have not filed a complaint against him with the police or anything. They're like, there's no case against him. It's just this news organization did this story with fake actors. Like these weren't even the women. They hired actresses to say these things, and then they ran it on TV. So he is being demonetized by YouTube, okay? And then Rumble, which is a competitor to YouTube, they've decided not to take him down because this man is innocent until proven guilty. In fact, there's no criminal charges even being brought against him. It's just this thing that popped up when he started saying the wrong things. Now you say the wrong things, you get canceled. And YouTube is right in the middle of it. Oh, I'm really interested to see if this makes it on today. Okay. They did this during COVID, guys. When people said, hey, try hydrochloroquine when you get COVID, it'll help you with your symptoms and help you get better. Well, guess what? The CDC just said that you can use hydrochloroquine as a therapeutic for COVID. Johns Hopkins University just published a study saying that it helps with COVID. But you were seen as a quack and you were taken off of YouTube if you said use hydrochloroquine. Because that's not what the government said you could use. The other thing is ivermectin. How many of you guys know what ivermectin is? Yeah, it's a horse dewormer. But it's used for a lot of other things as well. So when Joe Rogan said, use ivermectin, you guys know who that is, Joe Rogan? He's got the #1 podcast in the world, okay? So when he said that, he got canceled on YouTube. They took down his stuff. He got canceled on Twitter. He got canceled on Facebook. Guess what? Now the CDC says you can use ivermectin. It helps in some patients. So if you had COVID really bad, you had it really bad, You were told, don't take ivermectin. It could have saved your life. You know how much it costs? How much hydrochloroquine costs? Less than $1 a pill. Okay, but Pfizer had a vaccine. Moderna had a vaccine. That was going to stop the COVID, right? That's what the government said, take this. And Pfizer's made hundreds of billions and billions of dollars. Did it work? Maybe for some. Didn't stop the spread. Didn't stop you from getting it. Trust the science. Well, who's funding the science? If the governments are funding the science, then you got to be weary. Okay? You got to be weary, because if the government's paying for the scientists to do the research, and the government wants a certain conclusion, then the scientists are going to get the government that conclusion. Follow me on this. Now, it's not always the case, but you got to follow the money. Okay, so he's got polio. He's in a wheelchair. At a time when people with disabilities are looked down upon. So I want you to think about this. Roosevelt asked not to be photographed in his wheelchair while he was president, while he was running for president. Come on, what is it? There we go. Okay, so these are actual photographs of Roosevelt. You do not see a wheelchair. You'll be hard-pressed to find a picture with him in his wheelchair, let alone film, video. About 10 years ago, okay, if I open this door and somebody walks by, you can see him for that amount of time, okay? Somebody had a video footage of Roosevelt crossing a hallway like that. So it was like 2 seconds long in his wheelchair. It's the first video they've ever found. That's it. Now, would the media do that today? They like say President Biden says, I don't want you to film me on the beach. No, of course not. The media is not going to follow that directive. But they did back then. When JFK was having affairs, did the media know? Stupid not to. Did they report it? No. A lot of Americans, even though he was president for over 13 years, did not know Roosevelt was in a wheelchair. Okay? Now, he asked not to be photographed. So when we memorialize them, of course, we put him in a wheelchair. When he asked in life not to have his image like that. Now, he could stand, as you see here. Usually he needed something to hold on to or someone to hold on to. And generally that was his son. Okay? So his son would travel with him, help him stand, so when he was making public appearances, he could be on his feet. Okay? They also fitted his car so that he could drive it with his hand. Okay? So accelerator and brake with his hands. Okay? I don't know. He might have been able to use his feet. I don't know if he could do this or not with his feet. But he could stand. He had big braces on his legs. And the point I'm trying to get across here is, guys, at a time when people with disabilities were looked down upon, we talk about eugenics and this sort of stuff, right? Roosevelt is going to put himself out there and run for governor of New York and president of the United States. Which, if anything else, guys, that says a lot about his character, his toughness, okay? He is a strong-willed human being, okay? Now, my dad was born in 1929, so the only president my dad knew until my dad was about, I don't know, 15, was Roosevelt. My dad hated Roosevelt. If you have great-grandparents alive or older grandparents, You should ask him. You remember Roosevelt? What'd you think of him? The fact is, most Americans liked him because he was elected 4 times. Okay? So he's an interesting guy to study. All right? In his later years, it's pretty well known that Roosevelt had a mistress as well. Okay? As a lot of our presidents have. You guys might remember a guy named Bill Clinton. Okay, who got caught while he was president, okay, having an affair with an intern at the White House. Monica Lewinsky. Okay. Hey, we knew it when we elected the guy. Like, he was a philanderer. We knew it. The women came out. Like, when he ran for president, Jennifer Flowers, I had an 11-year affair with Bill Clinton. And it was pretty credible. Okay? We knew. But people don't care anymore. Donald Trump was the first president we elected who had been married 3 times. And it wasn't because he was a widower. Okay? He'd been divorced, remarried, divorced, remarried. And who did he remarry? This beautiful European model, right? These are powerful men. Now, Eleanor knew about the mistress. And she was okay with it. Because many people think she had one as well. Her own mistress. You get where I'm at on that? Mara knows. Okay, so was Eleanor a lesbian? Well, at one point she wasn't because she had kids, okay? And then maybe in later life she was. I don't know. But probably yes, okay? You tell your parents what you learned in history class today. Okay. What else? Roosevelt liked to smoke and drink, even though it was illegal. Okay. Not for long, though. That's going to change. Okay. All right. So, this New Deal, like I said, what is it? Well, at the time, I don't think they really knew. But what it's going to turn into is, let's try this, the CCC. Let's try this, the WPA. Let's fix the banks, the FDIC, the SEC, the TVA, the PWA, the NYA, the AAA, and so on. We're really going to see a big change here, okay? And we're going to learn all these, and you're going to love it. Now, there's a lot of good political cartoons here. This one is Harry Hopkins, okay? $4,800,000,000 spent, okay? We need, I don't know what that says, something need-based relief, okay? And Hopkins is calling for more, and the congressional cooks back here coming up with the money to pay for this, okay? This other political cartoon from the first slide, in one of his speeches, Roosevelt said, I would like to deal out the cards so that every American has a better chance at a winning hand. And that's where this political cartoon comes from. And that's Franklin Roosevelt there. Okay. And there. Okay. So, right off the bat, Congress is going to propose the 20th Amendment. So we did the 18th, prohibition, 19th, women's suffrage, 20th Amendment is known as the lame duck amendment. Cash. What month are our elections held? Houseman. What month are our elections held? November. Our presidential and congressional elections are on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November on even-numbered years. You get that? Mikey did. Our election's on the first Tuesday after the first Monday on even numbered years. And for president, every 4 years on even numbered years. Okay? So the elections are in November. The first president of the United States to live in the White House was John Adams. Washington never lived in the White House. Wasn't built yet. Okay? John Adams was from Boston. How did John Adams travel from Boston to D.C.? On a horse. That takes a while. And so did his cabinet. The other people that were going to help him in his government had to travel by horse. So the president didn't take office till March 4th. That period between a president losing or finishing a term and when the new president takes office is known as the lame duck period. By the time of Roosevelt, guys, we have airplanes and cars, yes, and roads. So they shortened the lame duck period, and now presidents take office on January 20th, members of Congress on January 3rd. Okay? On January 6th, which has become a famous date, is when they count the Electoral College and it becomes official. Okay? So, this is the lame duck amendment. So, Roosevelt's first term is actually short of 4 years. That makes sense. So, all subsequent, and he does an inaugural address for each one. So his second inauguration would happen on January 20th. His first on March 4th. Okay? Good? Now, what's the biggest thing we got to fix? Like right away. What do we got to fix? Something's got to be fixed. 9 million people have lost these. Their bank accounts. We got to fix the banks. A quarter of the country's banks have gone under. Okay? So right off the bat, guys, Congress is ready. This is the first 100 days. Okay, I have it up here too. Okay? You are going to see more action by Congress in the first 100 days of Roosevelt's presidency than at any time in American history. There's a lot of action. Okay, in 5 days after he takes office, they're going to start to address the banks. So, Congress, they're like, what do you got, Mr. President? What do you want to do? We're ready. We need to act. We're in a depression. We got to work. Right? So they're ready to change. They're ready for experiment. So on the 9th, 5 days after he takes office, they call for a nationwide bank holiday. Now that bank holiday for Cash's Bank may last 2 days. Griffin's, it may last 2 weeks. Mara, yours is going to last 2 months. Your bank holiday. And Mikey's, 6 months. So a bank holiday is when the government comes in and it shuts down the bank on purpose to investigate, make sure it's in sound condition. Now, this is passed by the House and the Senate, signed into law in 1 day. That like never happens. You understand? It's rare. Okay. So the bank holiday, remember when we did the bonus bill and the Adjusted Compensation Act are the same thing? Adjusted Compensation Act and the bonus bill. The Emergency Banking Act is the bank holiday. So on Martin Luther King's birthday, the banks are closed. Thanksgiving Day, the banks are closed. That's a bank holiday. But this is different. Some banks are going to stay closed for a longer period of time. It's not just 1 day. It's going to give the Secretary of Treasury, starts with an M, Morgenthau, the power to shut down the banks and investigate them, and then open those banks back up when they see they're ready to be opened back up. Okay. Anybody in here have a family member that owns a bank? Yeah, it's kind of rare to own a bank. But there were, smaller banks. There still are smaller banks. Is a bank a private business? If I had enough money, Abram, I could start the eBright Bank and Trust. Okay? You come, you put your money in my bank. Okay? Now I'm going to use your money to loan it to other people. And I'm going to give you some interest. I just opened a bank. It's a private business. Okay? Now I know you guys haven't had government class yet. Okay? But do you think there's any power here in the Constitution? The executive branch of government can go in and shut down a private business, investigate it, and reopen it only when the government sees fit. Does that power exist? Is this constitutional? Are they allowed to do this? No. So listen, in your homework, guys, there's going to be some questions about this because a lot of these programs and decisions that are made here are going to be unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court is going to strike down a lot of these programs as going beyond what the Constitution allows. Follow me on this. This can be in your homework, which is due Wednesday night. Yeah. Did people care? Guys, a quarter of the banks have failed. 9 million people have lost their entire savings accounts. People don't care if it's unconstitutional. They want somebody to fix the banks. You following me? So who cares if it's unconstitutional? We're in a crisis. Right? Like there's a gun crisis. There's a criminal handgun crisis in Wichita, Kansas. People are getting murdered every weekend. It's a crisis. So let's just take away people's guns because it's a crisis. But wait a second. There's something called the U.S. Constitution. You follow me? Now, guys, I don't know. I don't know if this is a big deal, but if these are banks, they're private industries, can you go in and shut them down? No, you're not really supposed to be able to do that, but people are okay with it. And a lot of times with these programs, people are okay with it. And the Supreme Court is not going to strike this down because it's over by the time a court case would reach the Supreme Court. Okay? So the results of this actually turn out to be pretty good. The government is going to send money to the banks. And as you'll see at the end of the slide, they're going to create the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation to insure your money in the banks. Okay? So Roosevelt goes on the radio and he delivers the first of his many fireside chats. Have you guys heard of this before, fireside chats? It's just a radio talk. Okay, now there's no TV yet. For those of you that put TV as one of the things that was mass produced in the 1920s on your test. Radio is correct. Microwaves, not so much. That would be the 80s, people. I took cars. Mass produced. Planes, I took.
What were the three that you were looking for?
Phonographs, radios, toasters, washing machines, vacuum cleaners, irons, refrigerators, absolutely. You know, the stuff I showed you pictures of in the slides. Okay. All right. So, listen, tomorrow, we're gonna do some heavy duty economics. So you need to bring your thinking caps tomorrow, okay? You need to be locked in. You got one. It's in there. Okay. I'm gonna see if YouTube allows me to publish this.